evening, jó estét, bună seara. My name is Zsófia Csergő, student of the MCC Senior Program, and I have the distinguished honor to welcome you to this public roundtable organized by the Matthias Corvinus Collegium. The aim of the MCC is to provide a platform not only for young talents to develop their skills, but also for the local public, inviting renowned academics from all around the world with whom we can discuss topics that are relevant on both local and international levels. We all know of the tragedy of Hamlet, especially when we ask the biggest question of the day: to sleep or not to sleep in this rainy, cloudy afternoon. All joke aside, it's been 400 years since Shakespeare wrote this tragedy, and even after all this time, it still appears through different concepts in theaters, in university classes, and everyday life. And what is that makes Hamlet so incredibly appealing to the audiences? This question will be answered at this public roundtable. The speakers will discuss what does it take to play Hamlet on the stage today, reflecting on the exciting reimagination of Shakespeare's best-known tragedy by the Hungarian theaters. Before we start, please, let's welcome our guests, Dr. Patrick Shove-Gray, Associate Professor of English Studies and Director of Liberal Arts in Durham University, and MCC Visiting Fellow. Dr. Adrian Papahágyi, Professor of English Literature in the Babes-Bolyai University, Director of the Center for the History of the Book and Text, Codex. Gábor Tompa, Director, Poet, and University Professor in the University of California, Director of the Hungarian Theatre of Cluj, President of the Union of European Theatres. And Dr. András Visky, writer, playwright, dramaturge, Professor of Performance Studies at the Babes-Bolyai University and the Károly Gáspár University in Budapest, Artistic Director of the Hungarian Theatre of Cluj, and lecturer of the MCC University program from Cluj. Thank you all for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Right, okay. Just first. Yeah, András. Yeah, all right. There you go. All right.
Yes, we decided to conceal our identities.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and I see some students here, some familiar faces, and some new people as well. Thank you. And Zsófia, thank you for introducing us. I'll be serving as I'm Patrick Gray. I'll be serving as moderator for the discussion, asking questions, and then after a time, opening up the floor to questions from you. So like many of you here, Professor Papahágyi and I had an opportunity to see a production of Hamlet last night in the Hungarian Theatre of Cluj for the first time, and directed by Gábor Tompa with help from András Visky in his role as dramaturge. The performance was electrifying, fascinating, very innovative, very much a Hamlet for today, but also tapping into some deeper veins of philosophy, theology, abiding human concerns. And it's prompted a lot of questions on my part and Professor Papahágyi's part about the thinking and decision-making that went into the show. So I thought we would start by singling out some of the more surprising and original moments of dramatic interpretation, and then moving from there into more general questions of meaning and perspective. So, Gábor, I'll start with you. By way of orientation, I thought we could start with the stage set. So the central physical feature of the stage set is this cubicle storage locker that has bookshelves full of books inside it and risers where people sit as if they were the theater audience from time to time. And then the other very striking feature of the set is a treadmill downstage, and we see different characters on the treadmill. So I wanted to ask you about these two very distinctive devices or aspects of the set. What prompted you to organize the set in this way, and how do you think it speaks to the meaning of the play?
Good evening, thank you very much for the invitation. Actually, I think that these objects you mentioned are not really separate, like from the entire concept. Of course, the treadmill came along when we discussed about some characters, and the first, the opening image of the Queen running minutes along before the audience enters the auditorium, and we looked at it in a way as a race against mortality. It's a kind of the time passing. The Queen has her age is around 45. It's maybe her last chance to have this kind of. We didn't want her to be involved necessarily in the murdering of the old Hamlet, so we wanted her to discover it as well from the performance. But she has this kind of, the aging of the body and this kind of race against mortality. The other thing is that we it's not the first time I direct Hamlet, and I did it in a very different idea, very different concept. Here 30 years ago or more, maybe, I think maybe 40, I don't know, 35, and in Craiova at the National Theatre, where I myself identified in a way with the character of Hamlet, whom I consider to be a director who discovers that the only way to find out the truth and to point out the crime and the tyranny is theater, by directing a performance. So that way, the importance of the performance inside the play is of vital. It's like death and life. But today, I was interested in something different. Because that performance has been built on this kind of the labyrinth of different theatrical mirrors, in which at a certain point, as a high point of the performance, Hamlet is watching a performance which the king is watching, which the audience from the play is watching, and our audience is watching the audience, and Hamlet watching the show, and so on and so on. But this performance is of historic importance because from this performance an entire country finds out what happened. So it's a revolutionary performance, and it has to have a very strong impact on its audience in order to convince and even to have an effect on the king himself. This time we were interested in the attitude of a more younger generation in a world which is mostly a world of, a consume world, which dominated by interest and profit, by manipulated media, the media who manipulates the public opinion, in a kind of different kind of labyrinth, not theatrical one, a labyrinth where, it's very hard to find the truth and to peel off all that layers of lies which are put on. So we, I think, meeting the actor who plays Hamlet in our performance, Vecsei Miklós, and some of his classmates and colleagues in the young theater, we discovered that there are it's a kind of, hope that we discovered that there are people from the young people who are not anymore interested in, how much they earn or profit or the commercial world or the consumer world, but they are like some new ascets who make a kind of sacrifice, or because they are passionately interested to find the truth, and they live like some monks sometimes, you know. So, you know, we try to create a kind of small room where Hamlet like has a lot of books. He studied in Wittenberg with all those young comrades or fellow students. That's we called it the Wittenberg group. The Wittenberg group, who is like somehow different than the average young people today, not so much interested in all these digital devices, phones, laptops, whatever, in which sometimes people believe more than the reality. One of my daughter's classmates came to visit us, and I asked her, how's the weather? And she took herself and said, it's cloudy. And I said, but look through the window, it's sunshine. No, it's cloudy. So she believed more what the iPhone told her about the weather than what she saw with her own eyes. So actually, he's throwing out all these books, and he prefers, you know, he's retiring there as a refuge, but then he realizes that it can be used as a place, for to mass there all those people who come to celebrate, let's say, his birthday in our performance, and it becomes a place of auditorium, but also it's in this improvised performance as a place of witnessing how the king, playing the role of his murdered brother, realizes through, while they are reading that play, that it's about him. So then in the second half, this room is isolated, like with some tapes. It's taped, no trespassing, and it's like you know, it's like a sinful place, becoming for the power, of course, and as much as Ophelia, in a way, being a witness, and for that reason, she becomes really uncomfortable for the regime. She has to be eliminated. That's the same, they have the same purpose, of course, with Hamlet. So these two elements in this basically empty space determine, in a way, you know, because the relationship of the other people as well with this room is also important, and the treadmill, to get back to it, becomes also because other, you know, some people run, the queen comes back 2 or 3 times on it, and at the end, you know, it's like, while in the beginning she definitely tries to keep the rhythm against the passing of time, at the end she gets there letting herself being just taken, because she has this, not resignation, but you know, after discovering what happened, you know, it's a kind of, yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. That's very illuminating. I guess then, following up from that, Professor Papahaji, I wanted to ask about the original intellectual context of the play, which was some 400 plus years ago. And as you know, Shakespeare's Hamlet's being written at a time of great religious controversy, the Reformation, and also philosophical upheaval due to the recovery of various forms of classical philosophy. So what kinds of concerns or questions, intellectual concerns or questions, do you see in Hamlet that still resonate today? And are there moments in this production that you feel speak to that, those live wires that connect us, that connect the past to the present?
Yes, very good question. Thank you very much. Also, thank you for having me here. Nagyon köszönöm a meghívást az MTC-be. Don't imagine I know much Hungarian, but of course I can understand a bit. Yeah, so I'll stick to my English, which is slightly better than my Hungarian, and perhaps not as good as my Romanian ultimately. You're quite right. Hamlet, our contemporary, you know, that famous or infamous title by Jan Kod, which has been obsessing producers and critics and scholars, especially in Eastern Europe, for the past decade, kind of hides the reality that actually we are dealing with a text that was written around 1600, 1601, a text that was written more than 400 years ago in an age of religious controversy, as you well said. And one of the main conflicts there is between Catholicism and Protestantism, obviously. Now, whether Shakespeare was a Catholic or not is a matter of controversy. But there is one important thing. Hamlet obviously went to Wittenberg, the place where, of course, Luther nailed his famous thesis to the gate of the church there. Moreover, there are references to various Protestant realities. For example, when he speaks about worms, you can also think of the diet of worms, where Luther was called to recant. So a diet of worms is the worms dieting on Polonius, on everybody ultimately, because we feed the worm, we feed everybody to feed the worm ultimately. But it's also a slight allusion to that. There is, however, a very essential problem, the nature of the ghost. Hamlet has this problem. The ghost appears, and he keeps asking whether that ghost is a spirit of health or goblin damned. Is he a demon or a good spirit? Because the ghost is telling him a terrible reality that he's trying desperately to ascertain during the first part of the play, and he needs the mousetrap, the play within the play, in order to ascertain that. He fails miserably, actually, because the play doesn't prove anything. The killer is the nephew, so people could think that Claudius stirs because Hamlet is trying to murder him there, or suggesting regicide. So actually, the mousetrap doesn't prove much, but we know, we the audience, that Claudius is guilty when we hear him pray, right? That's the moment of truth. Now, the nature of the ghost is essential, because the question is, where does the ghost come from? Does it come from hell? Is it a terrible ghost? To maintain the ambiguity of the ghost, I think, Professor Tompa and Visky did something very smart. They didn't show it on stage. Now, in Kenneth Branagh, for example, in his film that some of you may know, the ghost appears as a terrible, medieval-looking, armored warrior. Here you don't know what it really is. And Hamlet himself doesn't know for a very long time if he can trust this. Horatio says, don't speak to it. It might deprive your sovereignty of reason. You may go mad after talking to the ghost. Now, in Protestant thought, there was no such thing as purgatory. There was only heaven and hell. If a soul is in heaven, of course the soul has no reason to come on earth and haunt people and ask them to revenge. Moreover, in the Bible, revenge is mine, says the Lord. So revenge goes against the moral tenets of that age, whether Catholic or Protestant. If the ghost is in hell, then of course it disambiguates, it kills the ambiguity, because then you know that the ghost is a devil. And if you look at the result of the play as it unfolds, actually what Hamlet is doing, he manages to kill his entire family, his lover's family, right? Ophelia, Polonius, Laertes, all of them slaughtered. The second family, if you wish, the family of the secret counselor, or if you wish, of the prime minister, more or less, right? To turn it into modern terms. He also decimates his entire family, and at the end, he surrenders Denmark to the enemy, to Fortinbras. So what is the result of his action? Disaster, murder, madness, suicide, and politically, it's the loss of the country. So you have a reason to believe that ultimately the ghost was a demon. That would be the Protestant thing. So either heaven or hell. And then, but how Shakespeare is always ambiguous, and this is what makes him such a great writer. If he gave you a reading key, if you knew exactly what the ghost was, people like Tompa Gábor would be out of job because they would have to follow this. But now they have the liberty to interpret it infinitely and even to stage it 2 or 3 times. How many times did you stage it? 3 times, I think. Oh, you see, because now, and the problem is that the ghost, in order to believe that that ghost comes from purgatory, a place that is ambiguous, he's on his way to salvation, but actually still damned in a way and suffering. And actually the ghost is suggesting this. I am for a certain time doomed to dwell and so on. You need to be a Catholic. And here is Shakespeare's absolute genius. And now I'm going to say something about the Wittenberg group. I like very much the fact that you kept on stage the very marginal characters, Francisco and Bernardo, who only appear in the first scene. Bernardo appears a bit in the second scene as well, and Marcellus, but actually they are just guards. Now, if Shakespeare were any mediocre playwright, you would have guard 1 and guard 2, right? Waiting on the ramparts of Elsinore. Now, if you don't know where Elsinore is, it's Helsingfors in Denmark, and it overlooks what is today Sweden and what used to be Norway. So really, if you are on the ramparts of Elsinore, you can see the enemy across the sea. So it's a rampart protecting Denmark from Norway. And the spectre of Norwegian invasion is actually haunting them from the very beginning. They are fearing this. All right, guard 1, guard 2, saying there and saying, stop, who are you? Say the password. All right, I'm translating, right? And he says, long live the king. Now, Shakespeare could have left it at it, but he gives them names. Francisco, you come most timely on your hour, and so on. He says, Bernardo. And now I ask this question, why are these 2 people called Francisco and Bernardo in Denmark? Why should 2 Danes be called Francisco and Bernardo? Why should actually Ophelia be called with a Greek name Ophelia and Laertes with the name of Ulysses' father, because Laertes in the Odyssey is Ulysses' father? Why should they have Greek, Latin, Claudius, Horatio, and then Latin, Italian names? The smart thing, and here is the absolute genius of Shakespeare, Francisco and Bernardo are the founders of 2 important Catholic monastic orders, the Franciscans and the Cistercians. And moreover, Bernard of Clairvaux, Bernardo, Saint Bernard, was also one of the earliest authors who around 1100 wrote about purgatory. He also mentions Patrick, by the way, who also has a vision of the purgatory, St. Patrick's purgatory. So Shakespeare is entering in the play a lot of things that smart people from the age would recognize as overtly Catholic. So Francisco and Bernardo, not really the Wittenberg Protestant group, but rather 2 Catholics. Why? Because only Catholics could believe in the reality of ghosts, say that they saw it, expect to see the ghost, right? And relate to it as if it were an ambiguous being from purgatory. Please also note that the ghost in the original text is generally called it or that thing. Only Hamlet says, I'll call you royal father, royal Dane, and so on, right? So this is the intellectual background of the play. Deep political concerns, deep theological debates, and so on. The play is, as I read it, and I'll finish with this, Patrick, it's a play that centers very much on providence and fate. At a given moment, Hamlet says that there is a special providence in the fall of a sparrow, paraphrasing Matthew 5. Now, a special providence, he says that there is this, which is both Catholic, you find it in Thomas Aquinas, and Calvinist. There is a special providence. At the beginning, he struggles to understand. He curses himself for being lazy. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I, and so on and so forth. Then he starts acting, but when he doesn't act, it's disaster. When he spares Claudius, it's a disaster. If he had killed Claudius there, the play would have stopped, there would have been no more murders, it would have been a very good resolution. When he is over hasty and kills Polonius, he's wrong again, right? So when he doesn't do anything, he's wrong. When he does too much, he's wrong. He's wrong all through the play. He's wrong in the way he treats Ophelia. Get thee to a nunnery. And by the way, in Elizabethan slang, nunnery also meant brothel. Right? You're a whore, go to a brothel. There shall be no more birth, you shouldn't be a breeder of sinners, and so on. He's telling her terrible things, which drives her mad. He's killing her father. But then in the second part of the play, when he comes back from England, from as if it were from the other world, from death, he comes back from death, he resurrects in a way. He crosses the sea, the water that kills Ophelia rejuvenates Hamlet. And now, if you read attentively Acts 4 and 5, especially Act 5, you will see that he's in a way reconciled to his destiny. He says, let be, come what may, I will go there. The providence will decide. If it must happen, it will. If not, it will. Let be. So he has lost all this. At the same time, Hamlet is not the one who was chosen by God to cleanse the foul body of the infected world, to put the time which is out of joints back. Fortinbras is. And Fortinbras is essential because he only appears at the beginning. He crosses the stage once on his way to Poland, then once again back. And at the end he comes and plucks the ripe fruit of Denmark, ready-made. It just falls in his hand. He too is an avenger. His father was killed by Hamlet Sr., but he just receives Denmark without killing anyone, without a sin. He was chosen by Providence, and this is incredibly ironic. This, I think, is the theological reading of Hamlet that can be supplied very quickly.
Okay, yes, well, thank you very much for that explanation, and also for sort of setting up the question I wanted to ask Professor Visky as well, which is, for those of us who may not yet have seen this particular production, I wanted to ask if you could explain how the ghost is portrayed on stage, especially, this kind of box in the background, and why you and I guess you both sort of decided on this representation of the ghost. Ordinarily, the ghost is played by, as you say, a tall, severe, frightening male figure in medieval armor. So this is the total opposite. Why?
Well, there are many representations of the ghost in the history of staging of Hamlet. For instance, sometimes only the light as a mystical emanation of God's presence, or many other, or a officer in a very contemporary costumes, etc. But here, and continuing in a way this theological approach of the text, because the text, it's correct, it's about a catastrophe, but the catastrophe happens on the stage, and there we hope for a catharsis. And this is a Greek approach of the idea of the theater, I think, in Hamlet, and not only in Hamlet, speaking about Shakespeare. But here, we decided to put this icon of the Great Depression of Europe in the 16th century. Is the icon of not resurrected Christ, Christ dead, of Hans Holbein the Younger, the one who was in between the Reformation and the Old Age, and finally he decided to remain a Catholic. He was the one who portrayed Erasmus, who finally decided to stay Catholic and to be faithful to the old age. The same painter portrays Thomas More, who was the last martyr of the Catholicism on the island, right? Hans Holbein the Younger, actually, he died in England. So it's this extremely, for us at least, important and meaningful icon of losing the faith in the resurrection. And I think that this is a way to interpret what we think about Europe today. Because here the old Hamlet is the monophysist representation of the body of Christ, where the monophysism is connected, as you probably know, to the idea of the embodiment of the Word. Whether Jesus was only divine, only human, or both. Finally, the Christian theological debate landed on this combination, 100% divine and 100% human. In other words, it's an object of the faith, because its two totalities are going in the same image. So here, our hope is that the performance would resurrect this idea. The resurrection in the theater has to happen in the soul of the audience, not necessarily on the stage. The stage only offers a room of an internal event. But here, what is important again, now theologically speaking, yes, that's true. The revenge cannot be associated to a Christian idea, because it's written in the Bible in many places that God takes the right of the revenge from his people even. So, but this image is connected to Ophelia also. And, on the stage, real persons appear, right? Not ghosts, and this is important. We are working with actors, with the body of the actors. With this, the body of the actor is a representation of the soul of the human, right? So here, Ophelia is the one who is singing, this prophetic revelation of the old Hamlet. Ophelia is introduced like a person who has chosen a new father in the person of the old Hamlet, because she doesn't trust anymore Polonius. She doesn't have any reason to trust Polonius because of his relationship with Claudius. Polonius is a tool in the hand of in the hand of Claudius, in the hand of this power, and she sings like an angel. We worked on this sound with the composer of the performance. I see him here, Vasile Shirley. Welcome. Because it's an asexual sound. It's like in the movie of Greenaway. You remember the movie of Greenaway? The thief, the wife, the cook. I don't remember the title. And there appears an angel. And again, an asexual angel, and sings. It's again a prophecy. So that image here is, for us, it's very important because it goes back to this period of transition when the meanings are disappearing. And this is so important here in Hamlet also. It's a slippery soil. We don't know the real meanings of the thing. If the ghost of my father, whom I loved would tell me to revenge, this is a demon. I would follow him. So it's a real drama. I mean, it's a real tragedy from the point of view of the Greek understanding of the tragedy. So, and in this space, we remember about, if you go to Subiaco, to see the monastery of Subiaco, to St. Bernard Monastery Subiaco, you will get there a cave, but a very small cave with painted icons on the wall. And the actual monastery, it's constructed on this cave, which is in the mountain, in the rock. It's a fantastic image of the small and the big, of the institutionalized religion and the soul of the religion, and this huge tension, which is a tension which never goes away. It stays with us, the tension in between the idea of the faith and the institution of the faith. You know, so these are maybe the backgrounds of this image. You know, this image of Hans Holbein the Younger appears in one hand in the diaries of Dostoevsky and in Demons. And we know that famous phrase of Dostoevsky when he goes to Basel to see the painting of Hans Holbein the Younger. This is a very narrow and long painting. And many details here. But anyway, but when he sees the painting, he says that if someone is watching this painting, he can lose his face. Why? Because in the painting it's not represented the hope of the resurrection, only the reality of the death. So is the reality of the death of an old, it's like, you know, you just mentioned, Adrian, Thomas d'Aquinas. You know, Summa Theologia, it's a beautiful architecture of the thoughts. But then at those times, we felt that it's going to collapse. And it's being collapsed, you know, in a way. Even the way of thinking is collapsed. I'm not nostalgic about this, but I want to describe what happened. So this angst, you know, if our audience would feel this angst when the ideas are so slippery, and we are going to lose our bodies, like Gábor mentioned Gertrude. But we can mention Claudius also in the same way. We can mention in this interpretation Rosenkranz and Guildenstern, the bodily approach of the presence, etc. So what I'm speaking about is the set of the idea, and the audience doesn't need to know every those things. It's enough to feel and to follow their feelings. And in this way, we try to put the audience in the same space of the ideas.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, this is very fascinating. I'm realizing that following the conversation, I think I might change up a little bit what I had hoped to ask.
It's becoming very theological.
Yes. Well, I'll take things in a slightly different direction. Yeah. So let me pardon me while I try to remember. Oh, I know why. So, Gábor, as I'm sure you know, there's a long tradition of Hamlet interpretation and criticism which presents Hamlet as the archetypal, ineffectual, isolated intellectual. This, I'm thinking of Goethe, Coleridge, Olivier's performance, the romantic Hamlet, the German Hamlet. And you know, for Goethe's Wilhelm Meister, Hamlet is a beautiful, pure, and most moral nature without the strength of mind that forms a hero. And I think, you know, in this production, Hamlet seems very different. You have a Hamlet who is capable, quick to physical violence. He is confronts Claudius very directly. He is not necessarily isolated, but instead has a kind of entourage of fellow students and so on. And I was curious what prompted you to make that choice, you know, and I thought also you could see this reflected in some of the things that were cut and some of the things that were left in. So for example, Hamlet has these two long soliloquies where he berates himself for cowardice and inaction. So those are cut. Instead, you keep the scene with Osric and you add the sort of dumb show of Ophelia being murdered by the very memorable two female sort of bond girls or goons, you know. So I wanted to ask you about this. What, you know, it seemed you've talked about this, the political implications of this production, and I sort of wanted to know, where do you see this production in the tradition of Hamlet performance with these differences in mind?
Well, in my view, in none of I had three different versions of Hamlet. So one I mentioned, then I directed in '94 a very simple, very with 17 actors in Glasgow at the tramway. All were somehow actors and musicians. They all played at least two instruments, and I had 4 Hamlets. And we ended the production with. There were 3 male actors and one woman, and she ended the performance with "To Be or Not to Be," and that was in the moment where I think it was the first referendum of Scotland leaving the UK, which failed, but it had a really strong impact on them. But in none of these versions, I believe that Hamlet is inactive. Even when he is a director, he organizes that performance. He is somehow, let's say, almost paralyzed until his meeting with the ghost. But then, you know, this idea of the performance, which comes to him by either meeting the actors. We had the first version, we had the ghost. Shakespeare was the ghost. And also the player king was the same actor, was Shakespeare, because the idea of this kind of the theater, or it was also about the sense of directing. It was a meditation upon the art of directing in a way. And I said that this is somehow a model to every director, not to start to work on a play until, I don't think that I wished any of the directors to have their fathers killed, but to have this huge stake to do a performance like a wheel, like, you know, it's, but the you know, the dilemma of Hamlet after the performance is, it's a very emotionally, it's a very high point of the performance, but also, you know, because he has a triumph after the performance by the reaction of the king, but also a despair. What shall I do now as a director? Shall I kill somebody? Because his action or his activity is of a different kind than that, you know, even when he writes a play, you know, which is, it's not you know, that's why I believe that I have seen some interesting performances, but in every of these, whether it was Lyubimov, the famous performance from the Taganka Theatre in Moscow, which was a revolutionary. Hamlet was an openly protest, opposition guy. Vladimir Vysotsky, the performance started with him playing the guitar, the verses of Boris Pasternak, Hamlet, and then there was this huge curtain, moving curtain, elastic, and which wiped away everything many times from the stage. It's like the curtain of history. It was a very political performance in the Soviet Union. It was the end of the 70s. I had the chance to watch the performance in Belgrade at the Bitev when I was a student in the second year. And I haven't really seen this kind of what the literature and the studies about Hamlet describe as a it's almost very difficult to, when you stage the performance, there are so many events, beginning with his relationship with his mother, but also participating, we wanted to have Hamlet at the beginning in a way, in a very strange, odd, weird, ironic way, to help her, get ready for the wedding, which hurts him a lot. He has this wedding gown, which he helps his mother, put on, and then, with that pipe, with that hose,
Sprays her with the water
like,
hose.
It's a kind of, it's between gentleness and cruelty, because she's affected. It's, as András says, it's every single scene almost is a source of inner drama, inner conflict. This dualism of the characters as well. So I think that what Hamlet decides, or or he has this revelation with the ghost. In our performance, in this current performance, I was really thinking that I think that right now, for me at least, the ghost cannot be anyone else but God, and because Hamlet is. Nobody sees, as we see that Christ, but he doesn't see, but he believes. So in a way, I have to say that the way we discussed sometimes with the actor is that Hamlet has a very strange kind of, starting from Jesus's what he says to Thomas. Yes, that there are those who are happy, those who don't see but believe. Yes, so he is in a way this kind of this meeting with the ghost is very dramatic. It's almost wearing him out physically, but also makes him happy in a way. This kind of, because this faith, because this.
It's a Holy Ghost.
Yeah, I mean, that was our option this time, yes, of course. So I don't know how to place this performance, but in a way, for me, I was like between 30 and 40 with those two versions of Hamlet, and in that version I identified myself with that character as a director. This time, because we all have children around the same age, the 20s, the early 20s, the late 10s. My daughter is 19, my son is 23, I have an older daughter. So I'm really interested in their, let's say, not to say their future, but how can they find their way in this world. So I'm interested in a young generation Hamlet, as today generations, seeing what. That's why I invited this. I did Richard II with him before in Budapest, and working with him and working with one of the other great, very talented actors, the young Attila Vidnyansky, who also directed some amazing performances, almost bringing a new language in the Hungarian theatre. He directed Romeo and Juliet in our theatre, which I really recommend everybody to see, because it's how they see the world, this generation. So I think that this is, it's a very difficult, because I can't say Miklos, who plays Hamlet, told at his press conference that I wanted to do the young generation Hamlet, but why didn't then they do it? Because I'm not a young generation, so I can't see that. I am just, because of this world we are living as parents, we're interested in this generation and finding these very, very hopeful, young, very valuable young people who give, at least for me, they are representing a hope in this very complicated world that they somehow they have a very strong choice, and they go all the way through with no compromises on it.
Great. All right, very, very interesting. All right, I think Adrian, I have questions I had planned to ask you, but I see you taking notes, so I'm tempted to say, well, either I don't know if you have a question for one of these guys, or if you have some thoughts about what's been said. I'm kind of open to. I'm kind of curious what you've been.
Yes.
I hope it's not your grocery list or something. I figure it's deep thoughts.
He's writing poems.
Oh, I see.
Not really, no. I just wrote Subiaco to answer to you, and then generation to answer to you, because these are the two important things. Now, András mentioned Subiaco, Sacros Peco, the place where Saint Benedict of Nursia first entered into monarchism and founded Western monasticism. And in the lower church there is a painting. You mentioned the famous frescoes. There is a fresco called The Triumph of Death, Il Trionfo della Morte. It represents death as a corpse on a hoary, on a grey horse, killing someone with a sword. And at some point in Hamlet, there is a passage, and this is what I'm doing in my interpretations, and this is what you can't always see on stage because the play is so rich and it would take 4 hours to act entirely, that the director must always sacrifice something. 4.5, yeah, with a lot of stage playing, very long. But if you only recite the entire text, it's about 4 hours, longer than any Shakespearean play, which should take between 2 and 3 hours. Now, at a point, Claudius is discussing with Laertes. He's trying to tell Laertes, when Hamlet comes, engage him in duel and kill him. And he says, I know that you are a very good swordsman, because a Norman rider, a Norman horseman came and told me about that you're a prodigy. And Laertes is asking, this is a very minor detail that you would really overlook. And he says, what's his name? Was he called La Mort? La Mort, which is in French, La Mort, death, or the murder, La Mort, murder, right? Is it called murder or La Mort? And he says, yes. And then he says, upon my life, La Mort. Look what an absolute genius. Upon my life, death. The triumph of death. Now, that image, you go home and Google it, the triumph of death. It's a medieval topos. You find it in very many frescoes in Italy and elsewhere. It's always like this. A rider, a horseman, killing, right? Actually, the play is also about the triumph of death. And this is something that you have shown very nicely. mortality. The urn, the coffin, the huge skulls that were all too obvious at the end, right? This play is a Baroque, disenchanted play. We are at the end of the Renaissance. We are at the end of Renaissance optimism. And one of the most central parts of Hamlet is the moment when he tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern what a work of man is, what a work of art is man, how splendid in ambling, how like a god, how admirable. And yet, what is it to be? It's the quintessence of death. The dust of Alexander, he will say, the quintessence of dust, right? And later he will say that the dust of Alexander can stop a bunghole, a barrel, can be used as the cork in a barrel. So this play is also intensely about mortality, about the triumph of death, which is also metaphysical. It's a metaphysical play. Hamlet is, in a way, the Baroque disenchantment which comes after this age of incredible Renaissance humanism, optimism, faith in the infinite qualities of man. But what is ultimately a man but the quintessence of death? Food for worms. That's one of the points I wanted to mention. And the second one, also related to mortality, and now I understand the metaphors that you had there, the passing of time. This is one of the topoi of comedy. In comedy, the young generation always finds a way to trick the old generation and to have their way, to multiply, to weed, to wed, to breed, and so on. In tragedy, in a way, winter confiscates spring. The old generation confiscates the new one. Think of Romeo and Juliet, where the two young people are killed by the hatred, by the inherited hatred of their parents. Here too, the libido, the excessive libido of Gertrude and Claudius confiscate that of Hamlet and Ophelia. They will have no children. Now you suggest she was pregnant, and that's possible because there was one obscene song in which she entered the room and she came out a maid no more. And the play is full of obscenities, by the way, including all those flowers that have obscene names. But the fact is that here too, the old generation's lust for living. You see, the old want to live, but the young cannot live anymore. The young are doomed and they die.
Also, there is a perverse line when I think Guildenstern or Rosencrantz or Guildenstern, I'm confusing.
Yeah, everybody is. They too.
Says that why
in Stoppett's play.
Why
in
are
Stoppett's
you?
Play, you
I cannot quote, but he says that why are you so disappointed when the king promised that you will follow him on the throne, which is a kind of very perverse.
Yes.
Because if we suppose that he is much younger, then yes, but until the grass grows, the proverb is.
Yeah, the king actually killed Hamlet and Ophelia. Critics, scholars talk about the sense of sex nausea that pervades the play. Hamlet is disgusted with sex, with generation, with. He would like mankind to stop, and there is some kind of nihilism. But at the end, there is also some kind of quiet resignation and providentialism. And this is something that I find as the metaphysical drift of the play. As for the obscenity, there are very many obscene parts that some are lost in translation. For example, nothing in Elizabethan slang is a word for the female sex part, zero, nothing. And when Ophelia is asking, do you think I meant country matters sends to a word I'm not going to pronounce here, and he says, no, nothing. I think nothing, my lord, she says, nothing. And then, of course, nothing means exactly country matters.
Sometimes these are not translated.
You can't translate them.
But we had like very great poet who translated this, but we don't have this scene in our performance now, but we had it in a previous one. Arany János translates brilliantly, as a matter of fact, with a great poetic force, but sometimes when, for example, it's also difficult to translate when Polonius announces the arrival of the players, says, here are the players, and he says, I don't believe, upon my honor, and then he says, then they came on their asses. Yes, and
well, let me kind of apropos of this question of generations within the play, I thought, and this is a question for you, András. So first I was thinking for you as dramaturge, you have to cut the play to put it on for a modern audience.
It's a great job.
Yeah, and then you have people like Professor Papahaji and me come along and say, well, why didn't you include this? Or what about this bit? Why did you leave this out? So I said, I asked you that, but I won't ask you that. I'll ask you about things that were added to the play. And I was struck by the addition to the play of a series of dumb shows, or pantomimes, with a little boy and a little girl playing Hamlet and Ophelia. And so we have a long stretch of time where Hamlet as a child is watching Ophelia play violin, and then we have a really rather radical reimagining of the ending of the play, which is, I suspect, spoken by this child. Now, maybe you'll have something to say about this too, I don't know, but I thought, could you sort of explain for the audience how the ending of this production is different from the original, and then why? What prompted you to change it?
First, it's not a big joy to cut the classic play, but still, you cut Shakespeare, but the text. The text never saves you. No text saves you. Not even the biblical text would save you, because it's a text. So what is our approach toward the text? First comes the concept, and the concept creates the text. That's true that the concept is created by the text, but it's a very strong dynamic here. In other words, if you don't put yourself in the text, it would be extremely boring, in spite of the fact that you are very obedient to the text. You don't need to be obedient to the text, but you have to lose yourself in the text. And I think this is the question of the creating an artistic object on the stage. You know what I mean? So, going back just a little bit to theology, that's why in the Christian concept of the Christian concept of the Holy Spirit is so important, because the Holy Spirit would interpret for you the text. The Holy Spirit is the translator, and it comforts you because you cannot understand everything, and you cannot understand yourself, you know. And this is, you are staging your lack of understanding of yourself on the stage. But now, going back now to your question more properly, Gábor just mentioned that he directed in Budapest Richard II. We worked together on that production, also at Vixinghouse. And I remember the discussion when it came up, and I suggested to stage the relationship between the characters in their childhood, because it's a meta narrative. It's like a play within the play. It's like a mousetrap for the audience. You know why? Because it's one of the most bloody play of Shakespeare. You know, Richard II, and it's not understandable why these people who were the best friends, even relatives, being raised together, they then just slaughter each other without any feeling of friendship or etc. You know, it's a big question here. Why we are becoming base in the life of the others. You know, it just happened 1 week ago, a bloody murder here in this community of people. Some of, you know, a young lady and a love affair, very complicated, very Shakespearean, if you want, story. So there are questions and questions and questions, and the questions are pointed to the basic idea of salvation. What is the real meaning of the salvation? And here, when you introduce, you put on the stage their avatars from their own childhood, is a possibility to deepen the tragedy. And, you know, and I think that this is extremely important to offer this deep tragedy. And there is a speech of the boy at the ending of the, you know, there were a lot of discussion about, you know, because it comes, you know, like a question mark. Do we need to have a speech at the end of, you know, it's a way to step out from the actual performance, to come to your present time, to deconstruct, if you want, your own performance. And finally, I found a speech which was delivered at the funeral of Indira Gandhi, the murder of Indira Gandhi. And that speech, it's unbearable because you feel the vacuum. Someone being killed, a Christ-like figure who created the satyagraha, the anti-violent approach of the politics, and he's murdered. It's another Hamlet, if you want. It's an Indian Hamlet, if you want. So, and the child is speaking to us. But what was important, and we landed, you know, it's not actually the speech, because I needed to change it for our, for our sets of ideas. But, you know, the opening of the play, it was in the time of the Advent, of coming of Christmas. It was in the 3rd of December. So you know what I mean. You know, we are waiting for the child to come, and a child is speaking to us about peace, about to open our hearts towards each other.
And the last lines are from John Paul II, you know.
Yeah. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So, you know, again, it's a text which is, nobody needs to know the source of, etc., etc. It's important to be just cut into by this text, or the sound of this child. He's not a professional. You know, a child on the stage, it's always, you know, it's always a big challenge for all of us. You know why? Because a child is always identical with himself and herself. And we are not. So we can watch ourselves in this mirror of an authentic life. It's a dangerous choice, you know, because it could be very sentimentalist, etc., etc. It's a dangerous choice, but you know, you have to fail according to the teaching of Beckett, in order to be saved. Yeah.
And just to come back to what András said about the text which doesn't save itself on stage, or at least, or doesn't save us, if it would save itself or save us, then all the Shakespeare productions would be brilliant, which would be unbearable, of course, because...
And most of them are very boring. Yes, because of this, because we let the text to save us. But this text doesn't give a shit to save us, Work on the text. Put yourself on the text.
All right, this is very, very interesting. So I wanted to, picking up, you mentioned Beckett, we've talked a little bit about I wanted to close with a sort of quick round of questions about theater of the absurd, and I can see that you gentlemen are doing something which is at once aware of this tradition, but doing something a little different, moving beyond it, harnessing it for some different objectives. So I thought if we could sort of roll quickly here. Adrian,
we should leave 10 minutes for questions from the audience because it's 20 past.
Oh, we have time. We have time. Okay. Yeah. So okay, good. Because I wanted to ask this round of questions because I thought it might be interesting because I'm curious your thoughts on its influence both more generally in Shakespeare production and theater, and then more specifically for yourselves. So I thought actually, Adrian, if we could start with you. For those in the audience who may not be completely au fait with what is theater of the absurd, what is its sort of premises, and part of this is coming out of Adrian and I and András talking about Silviu Pulcheretti's Ionesco's Macbeth, and coming here and seeing this is similar but different directions. So, Adrian, I wanted to ask if you could sort of briefly describe the theater of the absurd and how it's been influential within theater, Shakespeare theater or theater of this region, so that people can have an orientation before we discuss it further.
Well, I don't know if I'm the most qualified here to talk about the theatre of the absurd as a medievalist and early modernist. But for sure, when you see Shakespeare nowadays performed all over Romania, even by Hungarians or Romanians, it doesn't matter, you can see the imprint of the theatre of the absurd. I watched Andrei Șerban doing Richard III in Bucharest, and I could swear it was Macbeth, it was Ionesco, not... So I don't like that. I would like Shakespeare to be Shakespeare rather than Tom Stoppard or Beckett or Ionesco. But it's very hard to escape the influence of these authors. First of all, the death of language, the fact that nothing means anything anymore, that it's... Whereas in Shakespeare, words are so important. But there are hints already in Shakespeare towards the end of language. Words, 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 Hamlet says. You left that out, by the way. And it matters very much how you say that. Saying words, words.
They did it on stage with the sheets of paper, sort of. Anyway, sorry.
Or was there? But no, he was throwing out the books, but Polonius didn't ask him, what do you read, my lord? Words, words, words. In Timon of Athens, Timon says, I would wish the end of language, let language end. So, and that's, the impossibility of drama finally saving anything through words. So that's the absurdity of it all. Then nihilism. Then the indifference of characters. Anyone can be anyone else. You see Macbeth, Lady Macbeth is Banquo, is Macduff, is anybody. Reincarnations of the same, because ultimately it's about tyranny and folly, and whoever can finally be there. Whereas in a more Christian personalistic approach, each person is indistinct, unique, and so on. So the theatre of the absurd also adds this idea that everybody are just clowns, indistinct functions, and so on, which in a way detracts from the dignity of Shakespearean characters, because Shakespeare does something that no other author does to such a great extent. He allows each character to have his or her personality and dignity. Claudius, for example, the villain. Claudius is a very smart politician. In the second scene, he first defuses the invasion of Fortinbras by sending letters and so on. I'm not insisting. Then he goes on to home affairs. He allows the son of his most important counselor, Laertes, to go back to France and so on. And finally he comes to personal, domestic affairs, to Hamlet, his son, his discontent cousin Hamlet, right? And he tries to pacify him. He even promises that he will be his heir and so on. Very diplomatic. If Claudius had continued to rule, no one would have died. Hamlet would have ended up being king. He would have married Ophelia, and Fortinbras would not have won, right? So allow Claudius to continue, and that's very often about politics as well. You see, the villains are actually better than the revolutionaries who want to turn them down, and at the end of the day they bring disaster. And that's one of Shakespeare's political lessons, also in Julius Caesar. What has Brutus achieved? Nothing. And that's what right? He killed Caesar, but he brought in the second civil war, another tyranny, and finally the empire. And that's Shakespeare's reflection on political things as well. Whereas in the theatre of the absurd, nothing really matters. It's all one. Guildenstern can be Rosencrantz. They are dead in a limbo. You see in Tom Stoppett's play, they don't even remember who they are anymore. Hamlet just crosses the stage saying some nonsensical words. It's the end of sense, of language, of meaning, of purpose, I think.
I also think that Shakespeare was lucky not to live in the 20th century.
Yes, yes.
And because you mentioned Jan Kott. Jan Kott is famously connecting Beckett with Shakespeare, like King Lear and Endgame. And I think that in the same time, the authors you mentioned, especially Beckett, but also Ionesco, it seems that in the 20th century, probably up to now, or maybe if there is no other resurrection of the dramaturgy, they are the last dramaturgs who are writing about salvation, in a way. It's Waiting for Godot, no, it's Happy Days, and all this trilogy, I think, they speaks in a way about, they all have this layer back, in Waiting for Godot, Vladimir tries to see whether, the two thieves were saved, but only one of the evangelists. But if the two thieves one of the two thieves is saved, then it's not a bad percentage. And he makes this analogy between themselves and the two. So then, it's worthwhile. What is this waiting all about? The same with Winnie in Happy Days, because when her umbrella is in flames, she asks herself, if it's a divine sign like the burning bush for Moses, then my suffering makes sense here, because if it's just the heat, then I will melt down in a very horrible way. Beckett is very much interested or preoccupied in the dignity of passing away, and also in the acceptance or making peace, the acceptance of the last things of life. So I would say that Ionesco wrote sometimes that he never called his theater the theater of the absurd. This is just something which not the playwrights themselves called their own theater as a theater of the absurd. Mostly life, reality became more absurd than the theater. But I think that these plays probably reflect, let's say, in the strongest way, the so-called post-atomic era, which luckily Shakespeare didn't get to live. Yeah.
I see. Okay, we've got time for one more question, and I thought I'd ask it to you, András. And following very naturally from this is, one way or another, we sort of we live in the post-atomic age. We live in the I would say theater of the absurd, but we're in the postmodern age, if you like. We're aware of the different kinds of techniques that these plays introduce and these sort of disruptions of convention. And I can see that your production of Hamlet is informed by these, but doing something different. And this reminded me of a conversation I had with András about what I was calling the theater of the absurd. Could these techniques be is there a necessary tension between these techniques and the kind of Christian vision that we've talked about suffusing Hamlet, even if it's a Christian vision that is in peril? Is there a way that we can draw upon these more recent playwrights and these more recent sort of technical staging innovations to communicate this older, and still present, sort of Christian vision of the world, the way that Christians understand themselves and understand God? Or is there a sort of necessary tension with the kind of playwriting and staging that you might see in Beckett or Ionesco?
Ionesco never considered his dramaturgy being nihilistic. He considers, together with Beckett actually, that Brecht is nihilistic. Why? Because for Brecht, the human being is a simple object of the society. He's interpreting the human being from a simple question of the social life. Brecht says you don't need to change the human being, you have to change the social structure. So that's why the absurdists, like Ionesco and like Beckett and like Adamov, he later denied it. He would leave his absurdist past. That's interesting again. But they say that Brecht is a postman. Yeah, he's a simple postman. It's boring. And I teach Brecht one semester, and it's extremely boring. And it's a new discovery for me. Because how one can believe in the purity of the human being looking around. So I think that, speaking just briefly about Waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot, it's a rewriting of the biblical narrative. The entire biblical narrative is rewritten, not only the New Testament, but the Old Testament also. Cain, if you don't believe that Godot is coming, you cannot stage the play. Or going back, I don't want to save Beckett, fine now, but going back again to Beckett, who would believe that Beckett, when he directed at Schiller Theater, when he directed Endgame at Schiller Theater, he wrote in his diary, Germany after the Second World War, etc., Holocaust, etc. He wrote in the diary, if they would not be cleaned by this play, nobody will clean them. The dramaturgy of the Beckett is a reformulation of the catharsis. but in a contemporary way. And which is the basic element of this contemporary approach of the language, actually? We have lost the meanings, the basic meanings of the language, which is not really true when we read Shakespeare. In a sense, it's true, because it's a period of transition from an old age, a beautiful construction, I would say, of the Middle Ages. It's a beautiful architecture. It's a Gothic architecture of the thoughts, right? And not just this thought, but this spirituality, which are very tied to the thoughts. It's a period of transition to the modernism. The end of the modernism, in many ways, it's true, is the Second World War. Is the second when we lost our beliefs in the development. This is the development of the human being when the technology is used to destroy people, children, women, elders, etc., etc. Footfalls. And the child. There is a Messiah here in footfalls. You know what? Don't be nostalgic to the old ages, because you would lose to reflect to the contemporary ideas, and to actually to yourself and to your daughter, who will ask you very tough questions about this. We are living in our own language. We try to take out meanings from our own language. So that's important to say. Absurdism, Gábor mentioned, or it's not a style.
But also, just for a sentence, because Ionescu and nihilism, you know that in one of his latest interviews he says, the only thing we can do for humanity is to pray.
And go back to the very famous London debate in Observer between Ionescu and Kenneth Tynan. Kenneth Tynan attacks him with the same judgment of nihilism. And he says, no, I'm not. I offer a space for my audience to reflect upon themselves. What is the language they are using? Does it make any sense to say, thou shalt not kill? Beautiful. But when the weapon is in my hand, the meaning, when I am in power, the meaning will change. What happens around us? You know, the basic elements of the Ten Commandments, if you want, or the only commandment of Jesus, were gone in the Second World War, at least in the Second World War. So, you know, the absurdism is the synonym of the politics.
All right. Well, it's an apt conclusion, but I think thank you for these very, very interesting reflections. I have much more I would like to ask, but I think we should turn to allow the audience to ask some questions. So, if you have a question you would like, we have time for questions. Yeah, sure. Okay. So, if you would like to ask a question of any of us, or more than one of us, if you could raise your hand, I'll call on you, and maybe, I can come bring you the mic, I guess. Yeah? Okay. Do we have one? Okay. So do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, I think we stunned them. Okay.
The rest is silent. That's equivalent. It says the rest is silent.
Yeah. Well, this is Shakespeare's great weakness for puns. I mean, sometimes the puns, the puns come in even at the inappropriate moment. Okay. I'm tempted to. Oh, there's one question. I'll say I was coming.
Even two now.
Oh, I see. All right. Courage. Yes, that's right.
Her children.
I would ask artists this evening, could you imagine a Hamlet pantomime escaping words? Okay, I cannot ask you to present
Next week.
next week, but a reflection. What would mean to try to make a performance of Hamlet without words? What do you think? I'm very curious about your answers.
Well, I don't need to imagine, because I've seen when I was in the second year student, I went with a grant to Poland. I spent 6 weeks and I saw a brilliant pantomime performance by Tomaszewski, Hamlet in Wrocław, which was absolutely great. And then, as I taught a lot directing a long time ago here as well in Marosvásárhely, in Târgu-Mureș, but I also taught 14 years in America, and in one of the classes I asked them to present with no words 7 actions from Hamlet. So I think it's a very good exercise actually, because if you concentrate and focus on this, I think yes, it can be. And the Tomaszewski show, which was less than 2 hours, I think it was like 1 hour and 40 minutes. It was, but in the same time, we are theater. I mean, we couldn't do pantomime. That's a different thing, pantomime, because pantomime is a form without objects, without props. It's the lack of objects, while the theater is basically based on this kind of objects which are selected, according to a concept and many other things, props as well. And the actor is in a certain relationship with, as much as he is in pantomime, is also in space, of course, but I think that some people called pantomime anti-theater, which is not quite right, but it's not far from, it's a different form. But I have to say, even if I wouldn't, or I have no idea right now how to do maybe a pantomime performance, but I saw a brilliant one in Wrocław, and that was a very valid performance of Hamlet.
I would like to add, if I may, that based on the text there were created dance pieces, Hamlet dance pieces. It's not a pantomime, that's true. It's another approach of the presence of the actor, the dancer, and of the body. In the pantomime, the actor is not present in the dramatic sense of the word. And just to, if you are interested, István, in this, you can look up on the internet. The National Theatre of Norway created a Hedda Gabler without words, a dance piece. And it's
the Midsummer Night's Dream as well, the same. It's a choreographer, very talented.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's another approach. When why when we are working or when we are rehearsing. During the rehearsal, sometimes we cut more text, because we feel that it's not needed, because the presence of the actor, the relationships, etc., already would create the meaning you are striving for. So, the text, it's not a ruler in a way, not even in the prose theater.
Did we have another question as well? Huh? No. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I suppose we'll stop there. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your time and conversation. This was very, very intriguing. And thank you as well, audience, for attending. Students, it's good to see you. Perhaps we'll discuss on Monday with some of you, and some of you with me, some of you with Adrian. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. All right. Thank you. Bye.